In the heart of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, a $5,000 dress drips with carbonara sauce. But that's not the real tragedy unfolding. When billionaire CEO Evelyn Thornton recognizes the face of the man who just destroyed her couture, she realizes he's the same person who shattered her heart with cruel words at a fertility clinic waiting room. What happens next will require understanding how two people who clearly despised each other from that first moment ended up in a situation where love conquers all, even the most ruthless mother's attempts to destroy it. If you're ready for a story about breaking generational trauma, the power of chosen family, and how sometimes the coldest hearts just need the right warmth to melt, then stay with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This journey is going to touch your soul. You're the ice queen who made my daughter cry. Single dad versus billionaire CEO's heart. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Giovanni's, the most expensive Italian restaurant in Manhattan. Every patron inside had stopped eating to watch the confrontation unfolding at table 12. Evelyn Thornton stood there, Valentino dress dripping with carbonara sauce, her hand trembling as she pointed at the man who had just destroyed $5,000 of couture. But the dress was the least of her concerns. The recognition hit her like a physical blow. She knew this face. The sharp jaw, the green eyes wide with horror, the athletic build now frozen in mortification. Her voice came out as a whisper that somehow carried across the hushed dining room. "You're the one. The man from the fertility clinic waiting room. The one who said the cruelest thing anyone has ever said to me." Dashiell Thorne looked up from where sauce dripped off his sleeve, his 6-year-old daughter clutching his leg in terror. The color drained from his face as memory dawned in those green eyes, and for a moment the chaos of the restaurant faded into silence. His voice was barely audible. "Oh God, you're the ice queen who made my daughter cry out." A small voice piped up from behind his legs. "Daddy, that's the sad, pretty lady from the doctor." What happened next would require understanding how these two people, who clearly despised each other from that first moment, ended up in a situation where Evelyn would ask Dash for something that would change both their lives forever. To understand that the story needed to rewind 17 weeks to the moment when Evelyn Ashworth Thornton made a decision that would bring her entire carefully constructed world crashing down around her. Chapter 1: The Ice Queen's Kingdom. Evelyn had spent her entire 34 years building walls. Not the kind anyone could see, but the kind that kept everyone at a calculated distance. With her chestnut hair that fell in glossy waves past her shoulders, porcelain skin that had graced business magazine covers, and a figure that made designers beg her to wear their collections, she could have had anyone. That was precisely the problem. Everyone wanted something from her: her money, her connections, her influence. Nobody had ever wanted just her. The conference room on the 47th floor of Thornton Tower felt like a temple to corporate power. 12 board members sat around the mahogany table, each one representing billions in collective wealth, and not one of them dared interrupt as Evelyn reviewed the merger proposal. Her Armani suit was the color of gunmetal, her hair swept into a flawless twist, her expression revealing nothing as she turned page after page. Harold Westbrook, the CFO, shifted in his seat, sweat beading at his temple despite the aggressive air conditioning. He had worked for 3 Thornton generations and had never seen anyone read contracts the way Evelyn did, like a hunter tracking prey through dense forest, missing nothing. She paused on page 47. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Her manicured nail tapped the paragraph once, twice. "Here, section 12.4. Your projected revenue is off by 2.3%. Rerun the numbers before I sign anything." Westbrook's face went pale as he double-checked his calculations. The other board members looked away, suddenly fascinated by their water glasses. "You're absolutely right, Miss Thornton, I apologize." "Don't apologize, fix it. We reconvene at 4. They scattered like birds from a gunshot. Evelyn remained seated as the room emptied, her assistant Melissa approaching with coffee on a tray that rattled slightly. The cup was set down without a word exchanged, just a nod of acknowledgement that felt more like a dismissal. Melissa retreated quickly. The door clicked shut with a sound that seemed to echo in the vast space. Evelyn turned her chair toward the windows. Manhattan spread below her like a kingdom sunset, painting the skyline in shades of gold and crimson that should have been beautiful. She felt absolutely nothing. The emptiness had become so familiar that she barely noticed it anymore, like a hollow space inside her chest where something warm should have existed. Her phone buzzed. Mother, of course. The text didn't require opening to know its contents, some variation of the same demand Catherine Thornton had been making for the past 3 years. When would Evelyn settle down, produce an heir, fulfill her duty to the family legacy? The coffee sat untouched, growing cold. Evelyn's contact list showed 847 names: business partners, lawyers, investors, vendors, society acquaintances. She scrolled through the entire list twice, looking for someone she could call just to talk. Someone who might care how her day had been. The search ended the same way it always did. Phone returned to the desk. The penthouse apartment, waiting above like a beautifully decorated prison cell. Chapter 2. The mother's visit. Catherine Thornton did not knock. She never had. Not even when Evelyn was a child, not even now when her daughter was a grown woman with her own home. The sound of heels on marble announced her arrival 3 seconds before she swept into the penthouse. Mink coat and pearls, and the kind of posture that suggested steel rods had replaced her spine. The white-gloved inspection began immediately. Catherine's eyes tracked across surfaces, hunting for imperfection the way a jeweler hunts for flaws in diamonds. Dust on the eastern bookshelf. Evelyn, your housekeeper, is getting lazy. Hello, Mother. I didn't know you were coming. If I needed permission to enter my daughter's home, I would have failed as a mother. Catherine settled into the chair at the head of the dining table as though she owned it, which technically she did. The penthouse had been a gift on Evelyn's 30th birthday, though gifts from Catherine always came with invisible strings attached. Dinner appeared as if summoned by telepathy. Catherine had brought her private chef, of course. The woman worked in the kitchen without making a sound, producing a meal that belonged in a Michelin-starred restaurant. The table setting was formal enough for a state dinner. Evelyn sat across from her mother and felt like a child again, constantly monitored for posture, for proper fork technique, for any sign of weakness. Catherine sliced her filet mignon with surgical precision. You're 34 years old. The biological clock doesn't care about board meetings or quarterly earnings. Evelyn set down her fork with deliberate care. I'm aware of my age of mother. Awareness without action is worthless. The Thornton family needs an heir. Find a suitable man, marry him, produce a child. In that order, it's not complicated. What if I wanted a child without a husband? The knife came down hard enough to ring against the china. Catherine's eyes went cold in a way that Evelyn remembered from childhood. The look that preceded punishments delivered not in anger, but in calculated cruelty. A single mother, a Thornton, raising a child alone like some common working-class woman. You would make this family a laughingstock. Plenty of successful women. We are not plenty of women. We are Thorntons. This is not your life to squander on sentimental notions about modern family structures. This is my legacy, and you will not destroy it because you've suddenly developed feelings. Evelyn stood her chair, scraping back. This is my life, Mother. Catherine rose as well, matching her daughter's height in her Louboutin heels. No, this is my investment. 34 years of training, education, grooming for leadership. I will not watch you throw it away. She left without another word, the door closing with the kind of soft click that was somehow more devastating than a slam. Evelyn stood alone in her penthouse, surrounded by furniture that cost more than most people's homes, and felt the walls closing in. The memory came unbidden, the way trauma always does. She was 8 years old, small hands holding a kitten she had found shivering in the alley behind their estate. The tiny thing was orange and white eyes barely open, mewing pitifully. Evelyn had smuggled it into her room, fed it milk from a dropper, named it Whiskers. For 3 days, she had felt something other than fear and loneliness. She had felt needed. Catherine had discovered the kitten on day 4. The sounds it made had given away its hiding spot. Her mother had not yelled. Yelling would have been preferable. Instead, Catherine had made Evelyn carry the kitten outside herself, had made her put it down in the rain, had watched her daughter walk away from the only thing she had ever loved unconditionally. When Evelyn had cried, sobbed really, the kind of tears that shook her whole small body, Catherine had locked her in her room for 24 hours. Thornton women do not cry. Tears are weapons of the weak. When I open this door tomorrow, you will be stronger. The door had opened exactly 24 hours later. Evelyn had not cried since. not once in 26 years. The ability had been carefully, methodically trained out of her, the way one might train an animal out of unwanted behaviors. Chapter 3, The Fertility Clinic. The fertility clinic was white and sterile and filled with hope that felt foreign to Evelyn. She sat in Dr. Patricia Simmons's examination room, hands folded in her lap, posture perfect even on the uncomfortable paper-covered table. The doctor was reviewing test results with the kind of gentle expression people used when delivering bad news to patients they pitied. Miss Thornton, the results indicate premature ovarian insufficiency. It's relatively rare at your age, but not unheard of. Evelyn's voice remained steady. Meaning, natural conception would be extremely unlikely, less than a 5% chance. IVF could potentially help, but even that would be challenging given your hormone levels. What are my options? Dr. Simmons pulled out pamphlets with pastel colors and smiling families. IVF with donor egg surrogacy adoption. There's also an increasingly popular option called intentional co-parenting. Two people agreeing to raise a child together without a romantic relationship. Legal documented, more common than you might think. Evelyn took the pamphlets without looking at them. She thanked the doctor with the polite smile she had perfected over decades of business negotiations and charity galas. In the Tesla on the way home, she finally opened the co-parenting brochure. Testimonials from smiling strangers filled the pages. My co-parent and I have raised two wonderful children. You don't need marriage to build a family. Her hands trembled, the first crack in her armor. The driver pretended not to notice. Evelyn stared at the pamphlet and whispered to herself, barely audible over the city traffic. What if this is the only way? The thought crystallized into decision over the following week. She did not want an anonymous donor from a catalog reduced to statistics about height and education and eye color. She did not want a surrogate who would carry her child like a rented womb. She wanted something real. A father who actually knew how to love unconditionally, who would be present, who would never make her child feel the way Catherine had made her feel. Finding such a person seemed impossible until the obvious solution presented itself. Where did parents go when they needed help? Where did people demonstrate their capacity for love in the most vulnerable way possible? Evelyn returned to Riverside Fertility Center, not as a patient seeking treatment, but as an observer hunting for something she could not quite name. She told herself she was being logical, practical, scientific about this. The truth was messier and more desperate, but Evelyn had spent her life avoiding truth when it was inconvenient. Chapter 4, The Single Father. Across the city, in a cramped office that smelled like old coffee and broken dreams, Dashiell Thorne was having the worst day of a very bad year. Morrison, the senior partner, who had been his mentor since graduate school, sat behind his desk wearing the expression people got before delivering bad news they felt guilty about. Your design work is exceptional, Dash. The warehouse conversion project is brilliant. Dash felt his stomach drop. Compliments before termination. He had seen this pattern before. But the firm is restructuring. Economic downturn. We're cutting 15% of staff. It's not about performance or talent. If we had any choice. I understand. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. The handshake was firm. The severance package was reasonable. The recommendation letter would be glowing. None of it changed the fact that Dash was walking in and out of the building with a cardboard box containing his desk, contents, and no clear path forward. Rain started as he reached the sidewalk because, of course it did. The universe had a sense of dramatic timing. His apartment in Brooklyn was small enough that Marlo slept in the bedroom while Dash made do with the pull-out couch. The building was old enough that the radiators clanged like church bells and the water pressure was a constant gamble. But it was home. It was theirs. The photos of Marlo's kindergarten class covered the refrigerator. Her crayon drawings decorated every available surface. The space felt warm in a way that Evelyn's penthouse never had, despite costing 100 times more. Dash opened his laptop and faced the numbers that had been haunting him for weeks. Checking account balance, $4,200. Rent due in 3 days, $2,800. Marlo needed dental work for a cavity, $800. Groceries, utilities, subway cards. All the small expenses that added up to survival, roughly $1,000 per month. The severance package gave him 3 months of his salary, $9,000 total. Spreadsheet math said he could survive for maybe 5 months if he found work immediately and nothing went wrong. When had anything ever gone right? The walk to Marlowe's school gave him 23 minutes to compose himself to transform the fear and frustration into the smile his daughter deserved to see. PS 321 was a good public school, the kind where teachers actually cared, and the principal knew every child's name. Marlowe burst through the doors like a miniature tornado, blonde pigtails, flying backpack nearly as big as she was. Daddy, she crashed into his legs hard enough to make him stumble. The hug felt like the only thing in the world that made sense. Hey, Pumpkin, how was school? She pulled back, green eyes bright with excitement. We learned about families, Mrs. Patterson said to draw our family tree. Look, the paper she thrust at him showed two stick figures. One tall one, small, both with enormous smiling faces and hearts floating around them like balloons. Dash's throat tightened. He knelt down so they were eye level. It's the most beautiful family tree I've ever seen. We'll put it on the fridge the second we get home. They walked hand in hand through Brooklyn streets that were familiar enough to navigate on autopilot. Marlowe chatted about her day, about the book they were reading in class, about how Tommy Hernandez had gotten in trouble for eating paste. Dash listened and made appropriate sounds of surprise and interest, all while his mind churned through possibilities for employment, for money, for any way to keep their safe world from collapsing. Daddy, why don't I have a mommy like Emma does? The question came out of nowhere, as children's questions often did. Dash stopped walking and knelt again, meeting those innocent eyes that trusted him to have answers for everything. Some families have mommies and daddies. Some have just mommies. Some have just daddies. The important thing is love, not how many people there are. Do you love me more than anything in the entire universe? Marlowe threw her arms around his neck. Then we're the best family. Dash blinked back the tears that would have worried her. The absolute best family in the world. Chapter 5. Desperate Measures. After Marlowe was in bed, after the bedtime story and the lullaby, and the careful tucking in of blankets, Dash sat on his couch bed and stared at his laptop screen. His friend Royce had sent a text earlier in the week, one that Dash had been trying to ignore, but could no longer afford to dismiss. The message was characteristically blunt. Bro Fertility Clinic downtown pays $1.200 per donation if you qualify. I know it's weird, but you need money. Pride doesn't pay rent. Dash had typed and deleted responses 4 times before settling on uncertainty. I don't know, man. Royce's reply had been immediate. It's not selling yourself, it's helping people who can't have kids. And you need cash for Marlowe. The Riverside Fertility website looked medical and professional and deeply uncomfortable. Requirements were listed in bullet points that Dash met without trying: age, height, education, health, no genetic conditions. The application form appeared on his screen like a test he was destined to fail, regardless of the outcome. His cursor hovered over the submit button. Shame washed through him in waves. What kind of father could not even provide basic necessities? What kind of man had to resort to this? But then he looked toward Marlowe's bedroom, heard her gentle breathing through the thin wall, and knew the answer. The kind of father who would do anything, sacrifice anything, endure any humiliation to keep his daughter safe and fed and loved. He clicked submit before he could change his mind. The confirmation email arrived 30 seconds later. Thank you for your application. Your appointment is scheduled for Tuesday at 2 p.m. The words seemed to burn themselves into his vision. There was no going back now. Chapter 6, Worlds Collide. Tuesday arrived with the inevitability of a dental appointment. Dash wore his only suit, the one from his brother's wedding 4 years ago that was slightly too tight in the shoulders and showed wear at the cuffs. Marlowe was supposed to be with Mrs. Hartley, their neighbor, who watched her sometimes in exchange for Dash fixing things around her apartment. But Mrs. Hartley's grandson had gotten sick, and she had called that morning with profuse apologies and genuine distress, which was how Dash ended up walking into Riverside Fertility Center with a 6-year-old in tow, feeling like an imposter in a world he did not belong to. The clinic screamed expensive in ways both obvious and subtle: marble floors, designer furniture, fresh orchids on every surface. The waiting room held roughly 15 people, all of them dressed like they had walked out of a Nordstrom catalog. Wealthy couples flipped through donor books like they were browsing vacation destinations. Well-groomed women reviewed profiles with the concentration of people making important purchases. Dash approached the reception desk with Marlowe's hand in his, feeling every eye in the room, tracking his worn suit and secondhand shoes. The receptionist smiled with professional warmth. "Mr. Thorne, please fill out these forms. It will be approximately 30 minutes." He chose a chair in the corner, trying to make himself invisible. Marlowe settled beside him with her coloring book and the juice box he had brought from home. Some of the other patients were glancing their way with expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. A child in a fertility clinic was apparently unusual. Dash kept his jaw tight and focused on the forms that asked invasive questions about his medical history, his education, his family health tree, going back 3 generations. The door opened with a kind of dramatic flair usually reserved for movie entrances. Evelyn Thornton did not intend to make a scene. She simply existed in a way that demanded attention. The camel cashmere coat probably cost more than Dash's monthly rent. The Hermes bag was unmistakable, even to someone who knew nothing about designer goods. She wore sunglasses indoors, which should have looked pretentious, but somehow worked, and her posture suggested she had never slouched in her entire life. Whispers rippled through the waiting room. "Isn't that Evelyn Thornton, the CEO? What is she doing here?" Evelyn ignored the attention with the ease of someone accustomed to being watched. She checked in at the desk, her voice low and professional, then selected a seat on the opposite side of the room. An iPad appeared from her bag, and she began scrolling through what looked like donor profiles with the same focused intensity she might bring to a board meeting. Marlowe looked up from her coloring book. Children had no concept of social boundaries, no understanding of when silence was golden. Her stage whisper carried across the entire waiting room. "Daddy, why does that lady look so sick?" Time stopped. Every head turned. Evelyn's finger froze on her iPad screen. The silence was so complete that the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers suddenly became audible. Dash felt heat flood his face. "Marlowe, sweetie, that's not polite." But Marlowe was not deterred by adult embarrassment. She studied Evelyn with the unfiltered honesty that made 6-year-olds simultaneously charming and mortifying. "But she does look sad. Like when you're sad, but pretend you're not." Evelyn slowly raised her head. Her eyes met Marlowe's across the space, and for just a moment, the Ice Queen mask cracked. Something vulnerable flickered across her features before being ruthlessly suppressed. But Dash saw it. Everyone saw it. When Evelyn spoke, her voice was quieter than anyone expected. "You're a very perceptive young lady." Marlowe beamed gap-toothed and completely oblivious to the tension she had created. "Thank you, I'm Marlowe. That's a funny name, but Daddy says it's special because it's from a writer." The ghost of a smile touched Evelyn's lips. "Marlowe is a wonderful name, very literary. Christopher Marlowe was a brilliant playwright." "I don't know what that means, but it sounds smart." Dash finally found his voice. "I apologize for the interruption." "She's very direct." Evelyn's eyes shifted to him, and he felt assessed in a way that was both uncomfortable and oddly thorough. "Honesty is rare. Don't apologize for it." She returned to her iPad, but Dash noticed she was not actually reading anymore. Her eyes had gone distant, focused on something internal rather than the screen in front of her. Marlowe went back to her coloring, humming tunelessly. The moment was already forgotten, in the way children forgot things that adults would replay for years. Chapter 7. A dropped crayon changes everything. The crayon rolled off Marlowe's lap and across the floor with the determination of an object obeying Murphy's Law. It came to rest directly beside Evelyn's Louboutin heel, red sole unmistakable, probably worth more than Dash's entire shoe collection. Marlowe hopped up immediately at Manor's overriding shyness. "Excuse me, miss." Evelyn looked down at the small blonde girl suddenly standing beside her. Something in her expression shifted, softened, in a way that suggested she was not accustomed to children, but was not entirely immune to their charm. She picked up the crayon and offered it with the kind of careful courtesy usually reserved for adults. "Here you go." Marlowe took it, and then, because she was 6 and had not yet learned to filter compliments, blurted out her thoughts. "You have really pretty hair, like a princess." The smile that crossed Evelyn's face was genuine and gone almost before it appeared. "Thank you, Marlowe. Your hair is beautiful too. That color is lovely." Marlowe ran back to Dash, her whisper still loud enough for half the room to hear. "Daddy." She's nice and so pretty. Dash felt his embarrassment reach new heights. Marlowe inside voice. But Evelyn was watching them now with an expression Dash could not quite read. Interest maybe. Curiosity. Something that looked almost like longing. Marlowe settled back into her coloring, but kept up a steady stream of chatter that Dash had learned to only half monitor. She talked about school, about her favorite teacher, about the project they were doing on animals. Then inevitably her curiosity turned to their current location. Daddy, why are we at this doctor? Dash struggled for an age-appropriate explanation. Daddy is helping people who want to have babies but need some assistance. Like helping them make a baby. Something like that, yeah. Marlowe considered this with the seriousness she brought to all new information. Oh, like when you helped Mrs. Hartley fix her broken sink. Despite the stress and awkwardness of the situation, Dash had to suppress a laugh. Kind of like that pumpkin. Yeah. Evelyn had gone very still. She was not looking at her iPad anymore. Her attention was entirely on the conversation happening across the room, and Dash realized she was listening to every word. When their eyes met, she looked away quickly, but not before he caught something in her expression. Calculation mixed with something that might have been hope. The nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Mr. Thorne, we're ready for you. Dash stood lifting Marlowe into his arms. The nurse's smile faltered slightly. Oh, I'm sorry. Children can't come into the examination areas. Panic must have shown on his face. He had no backup plan, no one to call, no way to leave Marlowe alone in a waiting room full of strangers. His mind raced through impossibilities, trying to find a solution that did not exist. Evelyn heard herself speak before she fully understood what she was doing. I can watch her if that's acceptable. The entire waiting room seemed to inhale simultaneously. Dash stared at her like she had spoken in a foreign language. The nurse looked equally surprised. Evelyn felt as shocked as anyone by the words that had just come out of her mouth, but she did not take them back. Dash hesitated, every protective instinct warring with desperate necessity. I couldn't ask you to. You didn't ask, I offered. I'm simply sitting here reading. It's no imposition. Marlowe was already wiggling down from her father's arms, clearly delighted by this turn of events. Can I, Daddy? Please, she's really nice. Dash looked between his daughter and this stranger who had just volunteered to watch her. Evelyn met his eyes and tried to project trustworthiness, competence, safety, all the things she had spent her career convincing boardrooms she possessed. Finally, he nodded. Just 15 minutes. Please be on your very best behavior, Marlowe. I will, I promise. The nurse led Dash away, and suddenly Evelyn was alone with a 6-year-old who looked at her with complete trust and zero fear. The silence stretched for approximately 5 seconds before Marlowe filled it with the enthusiasm of someone who had never met an awkward pause. I'm 6 3/4. I like unicorns and also dinosaurs. Do you like dinosaurs? Evelyn realized she had not actually thought about dinosaurs in roughly 3 decades. I haven't considered them recently. You should, they're really cool, except they're all dead now, which is sad. Marlowe pulled her coloring book onto her lap and flipped through pages. This is my family. See? That's Daddy, and that's me. We have big smiles because we're happy. The drawing was typical child art, stick figures with circles for heads and triangles for bodies. But the smiles were indeed enormous, and little hearts floated round both figures like confetti. Evelyn stared at it longer than was probably normal. Where's your mother? The question came out before Evelyn could stop it, before she remembered that asking children about absent parents was potentially traumatic. But Marlowe seemed entirely unbothered. She left when I was little. Daddy says she needed to find herself. Marlowe tilted her head like a small bird examining a curious object. Have you found yourself? The philosophical depth of the question from a 6-year-old caught Evelyn completely off guard. I don't know if I was ever lost. Maybe you should look anyway. Sometimes things are lost and you don't even know it. Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. Some wall she had not known existed suddenly developing fissures. This child, with her gap-toothed smile and her crayon drawings and her absolute lack of guile, had somehow seen through decades of careful construction in under 5 minutes. The observation was devastating in its innocent accuracy. Before Evelyn could formulate a response, Marlowe had moved on to showing her different drawings. A rainbow, a house, what might have been a donkey, or possibly a horse. Each one came with detailed explanations delivered in the kind of run-on sentences that children used before they learned about punctuation. Evelyn listened and made appropriate sounds of interest and felt something unfamiliar stirring in the hollow space where her emotions were supposed to live. Dash returned exactly 15 minutes later, looking simultaneously relieved and anxious. "Thank you so much. I hope she wasn't any trouble." Evelyn stood smoothing her coat with hands that trembled slightly. "Not at all. She's delightful." Marlowe launched herself at Evelyn's legs in a hug that was over before Evelyn could react. "Bye, Princess Lady. I hope you find what's lost and get happy." The words hit harder than they should have. Evelyn's vision blurred slightly, and she turned away quickly before anyone could see the moisture gathering in her eyes. "Goodbye, Marlowe. Thank you for keeping me company." She watched them leave through the clinic doors, Dash holding his daughter's hand, Marlowe skipping and chattering, the two of them a complete unit that needed nothing and no one else to be whole. Something in that image broke through Evelyn's last defenses. She opened her iPad, not to return to donor profiles, but to search for something different. Dashiell Thorne, architect, Brooklyn. The LinkedIn profile appeared immediately. Morrison and Associates, though the date showed his employment had recently ended. Awards and accolades proved he was talented. Education credentials from CCNY showed he was educated. But none of that mattered as much as what Evelyn had just witnessed. The way he talked to his daughter. The way Marlowe looked at him with complete trust and unquestioning love. The way they formed a family of two that was more complete than most families of four. The decision crystallized with the kind of clarity Evelyn usually reserved for business deals. She needed more information. She needed to know if what she had seen was real or performance. She needed to understand if this man was actually as good a father as he appeared to be, or if that 15-minute interaction had been an elaborate act. Her fingers moved across the screen, pulling up a contact she had used exactly twice before for extremely delicate matters. Thomas Webb, Private Investigations, former NYPD detective now available for hire by people who could afford discretion. The email she composed was brief and professional. "Webb, I require comprehensive background check and 4 weeks of observational surveillance on the attached subject. Weekly reports. Complete discretion essential. Please confirm acceptance and rates at your earliest convenience." She attached Dashiell Thorne's information and sent the email before she could second-guess the insanity of what she was doing. The response came back in under 10 minutes, Miss Thornton happy to assist. $200 hour plus expenses. Begin immediately upon your approval. Evelyn typed one word, approved. Chapter 9, the investigation begins. Webb's first email arrived 3 days later, marked urgent and encrypted. Evelyn opened it in her office with the door locked, feeling like a spy engaging in corporate espionage rather than a woman trying to make the most important decision of her life. The background check was thorough to the point of invasion. Dashiell Alexander Thorne, age 32. Born and raised in Queens. Father worked in construction until his death from heart attack when Dash was 19. Mother still alive, working as a nurse, remarried to a decent man who ran a small plumbing business. Brother in New Jersey, married with twins. Education history showed excellence. Full scholarship to CCNY for architecture based on merit. Graduated summa cum laude. Hired by Morrison and Associates straight out of school. Had won Young Architect of the Year in 2023 for an innovative, affordable housing design. Recently laid off due to firm downsizing, not performance issues. Marriage to Amanda Whitfield at age 26. Divorced at 30. The custody arrangement made Evelyn's heart clench. Amanda had voluntarily relinquished all parental rights, citing inability to connect with a child and desire to pursue her own life without the burden of motherhood. Dash had full custody. Amanda had not visited Marlowe once in 2 years. No child support, no contact, nothing. Financial situation was exactly as dire as Evelyn had suspected. Checking account balance of $4,200, the severance package plus his savings. No investments, no trust fund, no safety net beyond his own ability to find work. The man was one major emergency away from complete financial collapse. Criminal record was non-existent, not even a speeding ticket. References from former employers, colleagues, and professors all painted the same picture. Talented, reliable, decent kind. Webb's preliminary assessment was brief but telling. Subject appears to be exactly what he presents. Good man in difficult circumstances. Recommend continued surveillance for behavioral verification. Chapter 10. Patterns of Love. The second week's report came with video files that Evelyn watched alone in her penthouse at midnight, unable to sleep, unable to stop herself. Webb had followed Dash and Marlowe through their daily routine with the dedication of someone who understood that patterns revealed truth more clearly than individual moments. Morning footage showed Dash making breakfast, actual cooking, not grabbing fast food or pouring cereal. Pancakes were shaped like Mickey Mouse. Scrambled eggs and orange slices were arranged in a smile on the plate. Marlowe chattered while he worked, him listening and responding, and clearly enjoying the conversation despite the early hour. The walk to school was filmed from a distance. Dash held Marlowe's hand the entire way, never checking his phone, never distracted. They talked constantly, his head bent down to hear her better, her animated gestures suggesting she was telling a story that required full-body illustration. Afternoon pickups showed the same pattern every day. 3:30 exactly, Dash was at the school gates. Weather did not matter, rain, cold, brutal heat. He was there. And every day, Marlowe's face lit up like someone had turned on a switch when she saw him. The playground footage was what undid Evelyn completely. Marlowe attempting to climb the monkey bars, struggling, starting to fall. Webb's camera caught Dash's reaction in perfect detail. The instinct to run forward checked after 2 steps. He stopped himself, stayed back, watched his daughter catch herself and recover. When she made it across successfully, he was there with praise and a high five. But he had given her space to succeed or fail on her own. The video file was timestamp labeled, "Subject teaching resilience, not helicopter parenting." Evelyn watched that clip 7 times. She had never known this kind of parenting existed. Catherine would have prevented the fall, then punished the attempt. This man let his daughter try, let her risk, let her be brave. The difference felt cosmic. Chapter 11. Community Testimony, Week 3, brought community interviews that painted a consistent portrait. Mrs. Eleanor Hartley, the elderly neighbor, spoke with the kind of warmth usually reserved for beloved family members. "Dash is the son I wish I'd had. Helps me with everything. Broken pipes, electrical problems, heavy lifting. Never asks for money. When my grandson got sick and I needed to get to the hospital at 2 a.m., Dash drove us without hesitation. Marlowe was sick herself that week, but he bundled her up and came anyway because he knew I was scared." Marlowe's teacher provided insight into the child's well-being. "She's one of the happiest, most well-adjusted students I've taught in 15 years. Confident but kind, curious without being disruptive. Mr. Thorne comes to every parent-teacher conference, asks thoughtful questions about her development, volunteers for field trips, even though I know his work schedule is tight. Quality single parent doesn't begin to cover it." Royce Barrett, the friend who had suggested the fertility clinic donation, was blunt in the way that men were when they trusted their words would not be twisted. "Dash is the best man I know. Period. When his wife bailed, I thought he might fall apart. Instead, he stepped up in ways I didn't know were possible. Works his ass off for Marlowe, never complains, never asks for help, even when he needs it. If you're vetting him for something, whatever it is, he's qualified." Even Marlowe's pediatrician had nothing but praise. "Mr. Thorne is an exceptionally attentive parent, never misses well-child visits, asks informed questions, follows through on recommendations. Marlowe is healthy, happy, properly cared for. Some single parents struggle with the workload. He excels at it." Webb's assessment grew more confident with each report. Subject has strong community support and is universally well-regarded. No red flags. Behavioral patterns consistent with devoted single father prioritizing child's needs over own comfort. Chapter 12, The Cookie Incident. The 4th week's report came with a video file that Webb had labeled critical. Review immediately. Evelyn opened it with hands that shook slightly, wondering what could possibly qualify as critical after 3 weeks of glowing reviews. The footage was from a grocery store security camera, grainy but clear enough. Dash and Marlowe in the cookie aisle. The audio barely picked up their conversation, but Evelyn could read body language well enough to understand the exchange. Marlowe pointing at cookies, asking. Dash pausing, checking his wallet, doing visible mental mathematics. The hesitation lasted roughly 10 seconds. Then he said yes. Marlowe's joy was obvious even on the security footage. But what happened next made Evelyn's chest constrict. Dash walked back to a previous aisle. The camera angle shifted to follow and returned a sandwich to the shelf. The price difference was minimal, maybe $3. But it was enough. He had chosen his daughter's happiness over his own lunch. The timestamp showed this was from a Saturday afternoon. Webb's notes indicated Dash had not eaten anything else that day based on observation. He had given Marlowe cookies and gone hungry himself. And he had done it with a smile that suggested it was not even a sacrifice worth mentioning. Evelyn watched the video on repeat, counting the number of times she viewed it somewhere around 12, before losing track. She sat in her penthouse office, surrounded by luxury that could have purchased that entire grocery store, and cried for the first time in 26 years. Not sad tears, something else entirely. Something like recognition that this kind of love existed, that people could be this selfless, that she wanted exactly this for her child. Chapter 13, the final assessment. Webb's final assessment was unequivocal. Subject is exemplary, father, sacrifices personal needs for child's well-being without resentment, maintains positive attitude despite significant financial stress. Daughter is thriving under his care. If client's intention is to evaluate subject as potential father figure, he exceeds all reasonable standards. Recommend proceeding with whatever plan you have in mind. This is the real deal. Evelyn picked up her phone and dialed Webb's number directly. He answered on the second ring. Webb, I need his phone number. Personal cell if you have it. There was a pause. Miss Thornton, what exactly are you planning? To ask him something that will sound completely insane and hope he doesn't immediately hang up. This is about co-parenting, isn't it? Evelyn was surprised enough to be honest. How did you know? 30 years as a detective teaches you to read between lines. You're looking for a father for your future child, and you just spent 4 weeks confirming what you knew in your gut after watching him for 15 minutes in that clinic. Am I close? Disturbingly close. Webb's chuckle was warm. For what it's worth, if I had a daughter looking for a co-parent, I'd approve of this guy. Sending you his contact information now. Good luck, Miss Thornton. Something tells me you are about to need it. The text message arrived with Dashiell Thorne's phone number. Evelyn stared at it for 10 minutes, composing and deleting messages in her head. Everything she tried sounded either too formal or too casual, too presumptuous or too vague. How did one approach a complete stranger with a proposition to co-parent a child that did not yet exist? What words made that sound rational instead of deranged? Finally, she typed the simplest version she could manage. Mr. Thorne, this is Evelyn Thornton from Riverside Clinic. I have a proposition that will sound insane. Will you meet me to discuss it? Her finger hovered over send. This was the moment of no return. Once she sent this message, there was no pretending she had not crossed a line from eccentric to potentially unhinged. But the alternative was returning to donor catalogs, to surrogates, to raising a child alone while being haunted by the knowledge that something better existed. She thought of Marlowe's gap-toothed smile. She thought of Dash sacrificing his lunch for cookies. She thought of her own childhood locked in rooms to learn strength and knew with absolute certainty that she wanted the exact opposite for her child. Evelyn pressed send before courage failed her. The response came 30 seconds later, and it was not what she expected. Who is this, and how did you get this number? She had forgotten that normal people did not expect random texts from billionaires they had met once in a waiting room. Evelyn typed quickly, trying to sound less like a stalker. The woman whose daughter spoke to your child at the fertility center. We met briefly. I apologize for the unexpected contact. I have something important to discuss. May I buy you coffee? The 3 dots indicating typing appeared and disappeared 4 times. Evelyn's heart raced in a way it never did during board meetings or merger negotiations. This felt infinitely more important and infinitely more terrifying. Finally, his response came through. This is extremely weird, but I'm curious enough to say yes. When and where Evelyn surprised herself by suggesting Brooklyn, rather than Manhattan Rosie's Diner Court Street, tomorrow 2 p.m. That works. How will I know it's not some kind of elaborate scam? Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. I'll be the overdressed woman who looks completely out of place. You'll recognize me. His response was a single word, okay. Evelyn set down her phone and stared out at the Manhattan skyline. She had just set something in motion that could not be undone. had just invited a complete stranger into her life based on 4 weeks of surveillance and a gut feeling that went against every logical bone in her body. Catherine would call this insanity. The board would call it liability. Her lawyers would call it legal suicide. But Evelyn thought of Marlowe's drawing, two stick figures with enormous smiles and hearts floating everywhere, and thought maybe, just maybe, this was the sanest thing she had ever done. Chapter 14, The Coffee Shop Confession. Rosie's diner smelled like coffee that had been brewing since the Reagan administration and pie that somehow made the stale air worthwhile. Evelyn arrived 15 minutes early because punctuality was the only form of control she could exercise over a situation that had already spiraled beyond any reasonable boundary. The red vinyl booths were cracked, the linoleum floor showed decades of foot traffic, and every surface had the worn patina of a place that had survived through authenticity rather than renovation. She chose a corner booth and immediately felt conspicuous. The Max Mara coat screamed money in a room where most patrons wore Carhartt jackets and work boots. A waitress approached with the kind of friendly skepticism reserved for obvious tourists in local establishments. "Coffee, hun?" Evelyn nodded, grateful for something to do with air in her hands. The mug that arrived was thick ceramic chipped along the rim, filled with coffee that was surprisingly decent. She wrapped both hands around it and tried to remember the last time she had sat in a diner. College, maybe. Before Catherine had systematically eliminated every aspect of her life that did not align with Thornton standards. Dash arrived exactly at 2 p.m., and Evelyn realized with surprise that punctuality was something they shared. He still wore the suit from the clinic, though he had loosened the tie and there was wariness in his eyes that suggested he had spent the past 24 hours questioning his sanity. Marlowe was not with him, which was both relief and disappointment. He slid into the booth across from her and got straight to the point. "So what's this about?" Evelyn had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times. Every version had sounded deranged in her head, and now that the moment had arrived, the carefully constructed speeches evaporated completely. She settled for brutal honesty instead. "I have a medical condition that makes natural conception extremely unlikely. I'm exploring alternative options for having a child. I want to ask you something that will probably make you leave immediately, but I'm going to ask anyway because I've spent 4 weeks confirming that you're exactly who you appear to be." Dash's expression shifted from weariness to confusion. 4 weeks. What are you talking about? "I hired a private investigator to observe you. I know that sounds invasive and possibly illegal, and I apologize for the violation of your privacy. But I needed to know if you were genuinely the kind of father you appeared to be in that 15-minute interaction, or if it was performance." The color rose in his face. Not embarrassment, but anger. His voice came out low and controlled. "You had me followed. You spied on my daughter." "Not spied, observed. There's a difference." "There really isn't." He started to stand and Evelyn felt the opportunity slipping away like water through cupped hands. Her words tumbled out in a rush that was entirely unlike her usual measured speech. "I watched you give up your lunch so Marlowe could have cookies. I watched you teach her to be brave on the playground by letting her risk falling. I watched you walk her to school every single day regardless of weather. I saw every neighbor and teacher and friend describe you as the best man they know. And I want that for my child, not a catalog donor, not artificial insemination from a stranger. A real father who knows how to love unconditionally. Someone like you." Dash sank back into the booth, not because he had decided to stay, but because the words had apparently rendered him incapable of standing. "Are you asking me to be a sperm donor? I'm asking if you would consider co-parenting with me. Shared custody, shared decisions, shared responsibility for raising a child together without romantic involvement. It's called intentional co-parenting, and it's more common than you'd think." The waitress reappeared with coffee for Dash in a subtle exit strategy. "You folks need a minute." He nodded without taking his eyes off Evelyn. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested he was thinking through implications faster than most people could process a restaurant menu. "You're serious, completely. You want to have a baby with a stranger." "I want to have a baby with someone who already understands what it means to be a parent. Someone who won't use me for money. Someone who will love our child the way you love Marlowe." She paused, then added the truth that felt like exposing a wound. I don't know how to love Mr. Thorne. My mother made sure of that. But I saw you with your daughter, and I thought maybe I could learn. Dash ran both hands through his hair, a gesture that suggested he was trying to physically reorganize his thoughts. This is insane. You realize that, right? Yes. You're a billionaire. You could have anyone, anything. Why would you possibly want this arrangement with someone like me? Because everyone else wants something from me. You're the first person I've met in years who looked at me like I was just another person in a waiting room. Not an opportunity, not a transaction, just someone who happened to be there. He studied her with an intensity that made Evelyn want to look away, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. She had spent 3 decades perfecting the art of projecting confidence she did not feel. This moment required every ounce of that skill. What's in it for me? The question came out blunt, almost aggressive. You said you'd cover expenses, but that sounds like charity. I don't take handouts. It's not charity. It's investment in our child's well-being. You provide love and stability and everything I don't know how to give. I provide financial security and resources and everything you are currently struggling to maintain alone. We each bring what the other lacks. And if we can't stand each other, then we're no worse off than millions of divorced parents who manage to co-parent successfully despite mutual dislike. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, dropping some of the formal armor. I'm not asking you to love me, Mr. Thorne. I'm asking if you'd be willing to love a child we create together. If you'd let me learn how to do the same by watching you. Dash picked up his coffee mug, but did not drink from it, just held it like an anchor to reality. I need time to think about this. It's a lot. Of course, take whatever time you need. Evelyn pulled a business card from her bag and slid it across the table. My personal cell is on there. Call when you're ready to talk again. Or don't call if you decide this is too much. I'll understand either way. She stood to leave, gathering her coat with hands that betrayed her nerves through their slight tremor. Dash noticed, and something in his expression softened marginally. Miss Thornton, for what it's worth, I don't think you're as incapable of love as you believe you are. Anyone who would go through this much effort to find the right person to help raise their child clearly cares deeply about doing it right. The observation hit harder than any business critique Evelyn had ever received. She managed a small nod and left before emotion could compromise the composure she had barely maintained throughout the conversation. Chapter 15, The Decision. The call came 3 days later at 11 p.m. Evelyn was reviewing quarterly reports when her personal phone buzzed with an unknown number that she somehow knew belonged to Dash before answering. I talked to Marlo about it, not the specifics, but the concept of her maybe having a sibling someday. She was more excited than I expected. That got me thinking. Evelyn set down the financial documents and gave him her full attention. Thinking what? That maybe this is crazy enough to actually work. I have conditions, though. Name them. I want legal documentation of everything. Custody arrangements, financial responsibilities, medical decisions. I want my parental rights protected in writing before we do anything. Agreed. I'll have my attorney draft a contract this week. And I don't want charity disguised as child support. If you're covering expenses, I need it structured in a way that doesn't feel like you're my employer. We can work out fair terms. Evelyn paused, then ventured into territory she had not planned to discuss yet. Would you be comfortable meeting regularly, getting to know each other before we commit to this? Like dating, but without the dating part. Essentially, yes. If we're going to raise a child together, we should probably confirm we can tolerate each other for extended periods. His laugh was unexpected, warm and genuine. That's probably the most practical approach to this impractical idea. Okay, let's try it. But if at any point either of us wants out, we walk away. No hard feelings, no obligations. Agreed. They arranged to meet twice a week, once for practical discussions about logistics and expectations, once with Marlo present to observe how they interacted as a potential family unit. The structure felt safer than the emotional chaos Evelyn experienced whenever she thought about what she was actually attempting to do. Chapter 16, Legal Foundations. The law office of Jessica Park occupied the 23rd floor of a building in Midtown that specialized in family law for clients who could afford discretion. Jessica herself was 45, sharp-eyed and skeptical in the way good attorneys needed to be. Let me make sure I understand correctly. She reviewed her notes with the careful precision of someone translating a foreign language. You want a co-parenting agreement with someone you've known for less than 2 weeks. Shared custody equal decision-making authority and financial terms that protect both parties in the event of dispute. Evelyn sat with perfect posture in the client chair. That's correct. Dash beside her looked less comfortable with the formality but equally committed. We want everything legal and clear from the start. No ambiguity. Jessica turned her attention to him with an expression that suggested she was evaluating his motives with professional suspicion. Mr. Thorne, you understand this gives you equal legal rights to a child who will be genetically related to Miss Thornton. That's unusual. Most co-parenting arrangements involve both parties contributing genetic material. I understand. We've discussed it. And you're comfortable with the power dynamics here. Miss Thornton has significantly more financial resources. That creates inherent imbalance. Dash's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. That's why we're doing this properly, with contracts and legal protections. So neither of us can use money or genetics as leverage against the other. Jessica seemed satisfied by the response. She spent the next hour walking them through scenarios that felt increasingly like preparing for a business merger rather than creating a family. What happened if one of them wanted to relocate? What if they disagreed on medical treatment? What about education decisions, religious upbringing, holiday schedules? Each question revealed new layers of complexity they had not considered. Evelyn found herself grateful for the legal structure, even as she chafed against the coldness of reducing parenthood to contractual clauses. Dash asked thoughtful questions that suggested he had spent considerable time thinking through potential complications. The genetic compatibility testing happened at a private medical facility that catered to clients who valued anonymity. A cheerful technician collected DNA samples with the efficiency of someone who had seen stranger situations than intentional co-parents verifying genetic diversity. Results came back 3 days later. Genetically, they were compatible. No shared recessive conditions, no concerning overlaps. The baby would be healthy, assuming everything else proceeded according to plan. Sitting in the clinic waiting for results felt surreal. Evelyn and Dash in adjacent chairs reading magazines, neither of them processed, both acutely aware they were taking steps towards something irrevocable. When the doctor confirmed compatibility, relief mixed with terror in approximately equal measure. Chapter 17, Psychological Evaluation. Dr. Hammond's office was designed to put people at ease, which was probably why it made Evelyn deeply uncomfortable. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, abstract art on walls, all of it screamed therapy in a way that made her want to run. The psychological evaluation was non-negotiable, according to Jessica, who insisted that co-parents needed professional assessment of their ability to work together. Dr. Hammond was 50-ish, with graying hair and the kind eyes of someone who had heard every human dysfunction imaginable and remained compassionate anyway. She directed them to a couch that forced proximity without demanding intimacy. Tell me why you're pursuing this arrangement. Evelyn delivered the practical explanation she had prepared. Medical conditions desire for involved co-parent mutual benefit. Dr. Hammond listened without judgment, then pivoted to Dash. And you, Mr. Thorne, what motivates your participation? He took longer to answer, seeming to weigh honesty against social acceptability. Financial security for my daughter is part of it. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. But mostly I think Marlo would benefit from having a sibling, and I believe I can be a good father to another child. What happens if you develop romantic feelings for each other? The question landed between them like a grenade. Evelyn's response was immediate. We won't. Dr. Hammond's eyebrow raised slightly. You sound very certain. I'm not capable of that kind of attachment. It was trained out of me. Trained out. Evelyn regretted the phrasing immediately. Admitting weakness was not her style. But something about Dr. Hammond's patient silence pulled confession from her like poison from a wound. My mother believed emotional attachment was weakness. She took steps to ensure I understood that. What kind of steps? The memory surfaced despite Evelyn's attempt to suppress it. When I was 8, I found a stray kitten. I hid it in my room for 3 days. My mother discovered it and made me put it outside in the rain. When I cried, she locked me in my room for 24 hours to teach me that tears were unacceptable. The room went very quiet. Hammond's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes that might have been anger or sadness or Both. Dash had gone completely still beside Evelyn. His voice came out rough. That's child abuse. Evelyn felt defensive instinct flare. She was teaching me strength. No, she was teaching you to suppress normal human emotion. There's a difference at the go. He turned to Dr. Hammond as if needing confirmation from an authority figure. That's abuse, right? It's certainly emotionally harmful parenting. Dr. Hammond made a note on her pad, then returned attention to Evelyn with visible care. Do you still have contact with your mother? She's very involved in my life. And how do you feel about that involvement? Evelyn wanted to deflect, to change subjects, to do anything other than admit the truth. But Dash was watching her with something that looked like concern rather than judgment, and the combination of his presence and Dr. Hammond's patient attention broke through defenses she had maintained for decades. Trapped. I feel trapped. Dr. Hammond nodded slowly. That's an important recognition, Miss Thornton. We'll need to address that before you bring a child into the situation. But for now, let's move to practical matters. How do you both handle conflict? The session continued for 90 minutes, excavating into dynamics and patterns that neither Evelyn nor Dash had fully considered. Toward the end, Dr. Hammond posed a scenario that created the first real argument between them. What happens if one of you wants to relocate for career opportunities? Evelyn's response was automatic. The contract prohibits relocation outside New York City without mutual consent. Dash's head whipped toward her. Wait, what? It's in Section 7 of the draft contract. I thought you reviewed it. I reviewed the major points. That detail must have been buried in subsections. His voice had an edge that Evelyn had not heard before. You can't just decide unilaterally that neither of us can ever leave the city. I'm not deciding unilaterally. The contract protects both of us from the other person moving away with the child. No, it protects you from me moving because you have the resources to stay in New York no matter what. I might get a job offer elsewhere. I might need to relocate for work. You're essentially trapping me here through legal language. Evelyn felt her own anger rising to match his. That's not my intention. But it's the effect. This is exactly what I was worried about. You using money and lawyers to control everything. Dr. Hammond intervened before the argument escalated further. This is actually very productive. You've just discovered a major point of contention. How do you want to resolve it? They stared at each other across the coffee table, both breathing harder than the physical situation warranted. Evelyn recognized the feeling from board meetings where negotiations went badly. The need to win, to maintain control, to prove she was right. But this was not a business deal. This was the foundation of a family, and winning meant Dash walking away. She forced herself to concede ground. You're right. That clause is too restrictive. We should revise it. His surprise was visible. Really? Really, I'm used to controlling every variable, but you're correct that it's unfair in this situation. We'll find the language that protects the child's stability without eliminating your career flexibility. Dr. Hammond smiled slightly. That's excellent conflict resolution. You both prioritize the relationship over being right. That's crucial for successful co-parenting. The session ended with homework. They were supposed to spend time together in low-stress environments, observe how they naturally interacted, identify potential friction points before they became actual problems. As they left the office, Dash caught Evelyn's arm gently. Thank you for backing down on that contract thing. I know it wasn't easy for you. Thank you for calling me out on it. I needed to hear that I was being controlling. They stood in the hallway and something shifted between them. Recognition that they were both trying, both capable of adjusting, both committed enough to work through difficulty rather than abandon ship at the first sign of trouble. Chapter 18, Building Trust. The zoo trip was Marlowe's idea, proposed with the enthusiasm only 6-year-olds could muster. Evelyn agreed before fully considering the implications of spending an entire Saturday surrounded by children crowds and animal smells. Dash picked her up in his aging Honda Civic that had a cracked dashboard and a back seat covered in Marlowe's artwork and snack wrappers. The contrast to Evelyn's Tesla was stark enough to be almost comedic. Marlowe bounced in her booster seat. Miss Evelyn, are you excited to see the elephants? Evelyn, who had not been to a zoo since a school field trip 30 years ago, manufactured enthusiasm. Very excited, they're my favorites. Well, elephants and penguins and maybe giraffes and definitely the red pandas. The Bronx Zoo was packed with families enjoying early autumn weather. Children ran in packed strollers, clogged pathways, and everywhere Evelyn looked, there were parents engaged in the kind of casual chaos that seemed equal parts exhausting and joyful. She felt like an anthropologist observing an alien culture. Marlowe grabbed her hand without asking permission and pulled her toward the elephant enclosure with single-minded determination. The casual touch sent an unexpected jolt through Evelyn. When was the last time someone had held her hand? Dash followed behind, carrying a backpack full of snacks and water bottles and the other supplies required for a day with a 6-year-old. Look, that's Patty. She's the oldest one. Marlowe pressed against the railing, pointing at an elephant whose ears flapped lazily. Did you know elephants never forget anything? Like they remember people even after years and years. Evelyn watched the elephants and felt something uncomfortable stirring in her chest. Marlowe's hand was still clasped in hers, small and trusting, and there was something about the weight of that small palm that made Evelyn's eyes sting. Do you like animals, Miss Evelyn? The question should have been simple. It was not. Catherine's voice echoed in her head. Thornton women don't waste sentiment on animals. Liking things was weakness. But Marlowe was looking up at her with those green eyes full of hope and curiosity, and Evelyn found herself being honest in a way that felt dangerous. I think I do. I've never really given myself permission to find out. Marlowe processed this with the seriousness she brought to all confusing adult statements. That's sad. You should find out. Trying things is how you learn about yourself. Dash had moved closer ostensibly to see the elephants better, but Evelyn suspected he was monitoring the interaction with protective instinct. She could not blame him. She was a stranger holding his daughter's hand, an unknown quantity who might still turn out to be a terrible influence. They moved through the zoo slowly at Marlowe's pace, which meant stopping at every exhibit for extended observation and commentary. At the penguin house, Marlowe provided detailed backstories for each bird. At the monkey enclosure, she did impressions that made other children laugh. At the butterfly pavilion, she stood completely still, while a monarch landed on her shoulder, and her face radiated wonder so pure that Evelyn had to look away. You're doing great. Dash's voice was quiet, meant only for her. They had fallen slightly behind while Marlowe raced ahead to the next exhibit. I'm not doing anything, just following her around. That's more than you think. You're present. You're letting her be herself without trying to correct or improve her. That matters. Evelyn wanted to dismiss the compliment, but found she could not. I don't know how to do this. I keep worrying I'm going to say something wrong and damage her somehow. Kids are more resilient than you think. And honestly, the fact that you're worried about it means you're already doing better than parents who don't question themselves at all. They caught up to Marlowe at the gift shop where she pressed her nose against the glass like a puppy in a pet store window. The stuffed animals inside represented every species in the zoo, priced reasonably for families on budgets. Marlowe pointed at a plush elephant. That one looks like Patty. Dash glanced at the price tag, $15, and Evelyn saw the mental calculation happen. He had brought cash for food and maybe one small souvenir, but 15 was significant money for a family operating on severance payments. Before she could overthink it, Evelyn spoke. Which one did you like best? Marlowe. The elephant, but it's okay if we don't get it. Daddy says we're saving money for important things. What if I got it for you as a thank you for being such an excellent tour guide today? Marlowe's eyes went wide. Really? Dash looked uncomfortable. Miss Thornton, you don't have to. I want to, please. She met his eyes and tried to communicate something she could not articulate in front of Marlowe. Let me do this. Let me participate in making her happy. Let me learn how this works. He hesitated, then nodded. Evelyn purchased the elephant and handed it to Marlowe, whose squeal of delight drew smiles from other shoppers. The little girl hugged the stuffed animal fiercely, then threw her arms around Evelyn's waist. Thank you, Miss Evelyn. I'm naming her Ella. The hug lasted 3 seconds but felt infinite. Evelyn's arms came up awkwardly to return the embrace, and she felt something crack open inside her chest. Some wall she had built so carefully over decades, suddenly developing fissures. When Marlowe pulled away, Evelyn had to turn toward the merchandise display and blink rapidly to clear her vision. Dash's hand touched her shoulder briefly, a gesture of understanding and maybe approval. Neither of them said anything, but the moment marked a shift. They were not strangers anymore. They were not quite friends, but they were becoming something that might eventually resemble a team. Chapter 19, Domestic Bliss. The cooking disaster happened a week later. Dash had invited Evelyn to his apartment for dinner, insisting she needed to see how they actually lived rather than just feeding in neutral public spaces. The invitation felt simultaneously intimate and terrifying. The apartment was exactly what Evelyn expected. Small, cluttered, lived in. Toys occupied every surface. Artwork covered the refrigerator in layers. Furniture was mismatched but functional. It smelled like old building and someone's earlier cooking, plus something sweet that might have been air freshener or maybe just Marlowe's shampoo. The space was probably a fifth the size of Evelyn's walk-in closet. It was also the warmest place she had been in years. Marlowe gave her the grand tour with the pride of someone showing off a mansion. This is Daddy's room, but it's really the living room because I get the bedroom. That's the kitchen. The bathroom is tiny, but it works. And that's my art corner. The art corner consisted of a child-sized table covered in supplies and several completed masterpieces taped to the wall. Evelyn studied each one with genuine interest, noting the progression in skill level and the common themes of family happiness and hearts. Dinner was supposed to be simple spaghetti with homemade sauce, garlic bread salad. Dash insisted on cooking everything from scratch because that was both cheaper and healthier than alternatives. Marlowe was assigned sous chef duties, which she took seriously despite being barely tall enough to reach the counter on her step stool. "Miss Evelyn, you can help too. You can cut the tomatoes." Evelyn accepted the knife like it might explode. Her cooking experience was limited to reheating takeout and operating an espresso machine. Actually preparing food from raw ingredients was territory she had not explored since a mandatory home economics class in middle school. Marlowe offered instructions with the confidence of someone who did this regularly. "You cut them in chunks, not too small. We want tomato-sized pieces." The resulting chunks were uneven, but Marlowe praised them anyway. Dash worked at the stove, managing 3 pots simultaneously while answering Marlowe's constant questions and somehow making everything look easier than it was. Evelyn felt useless and out of place, overdressed in cashmere among people wearing jeans and old t-shirts, wielding a knife like a surgical instrument among people for whom cooking was daily routine. The juice incident happened during sauce preparation. Marlowe was pouring herself apple juice from a container too large for her hands. Evelyn saw the disaster unfolding in slow motion, but did not react fast enough. The container tipped, sending juice across the counter and directly onto Evelyn's cashmere sweater. Cold liquid soaked through expensive fabric immediately. Marlowe froze juice container, still in hand, face crumpling in horror. Dash spun from the stove, taking in the situation, and Evelyn saw him brace for her reaction. Every instinct screamed to express frustration. The sweater was $400, the juice was sticky and would probably stain. This was exactly the kind of chaotic mess that Catherine had trained out of her. Thornton women did not tolerate carelessness. Punishment for spills was swift and memorable. But Marlowe's face stopped her cold. The little girl looked terrified, anticipating yelling or anger or rejection. Evelyn realized with sudden clarity that her reaction right now would determine whether Marlowe ever trusted her. This was a test she had not known she was taking. She knelt down to eye level, ignoring the juice dripping onto the floor. "Hey, sweetie, it's okay. Accidents happen to everyone." Marlowe's voice was tiny. "You're not mad. Not even a little bit. It's just a shirt. Shirts can be washed." When the relief on Marlowe's face was so profound that Evelyn felt something break inside her. This child had been afraid of her, anger had expected punishment, and Evelyn's choice to offer kindness instead was visibly revolutionary. She opened her arms and Marlowe crashed into them, still clutching the juice container, mumbling apologies into Evelyn's shoulder. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "I know you didn't. It's really okay." Evelyn held her, this small person who smelled like kid shampoo and juice, and felt tears she could not quite suppress gathering in her eyes. When Marlowe pulled back, Evelyn stood and found Dash watching her with an expression she could not interpret. "That was—" He stopped, seeming to search for words. "That was exactly the right thing to do." "What else would I have done?" Yelled, gotten angry, made her feel bad about a mistake. He paused. "My ex-wife would have yelled. She always yelled when Marlowe made messes." The comparison felt significant somehow. Evelyn excused herself to the bathroom to attempt cleaning the sweater. But mostly she needed 30 seconds alone to process what had just happened. She looked at herself in the mirror. Expensive sweater, ruined makeup, slightly smudged hair falling out of its careful twist. She looked like someone who had been living, not someone who had been performing perfect existence. She looked like she might actually be capable of this. Chapter 20. Crossing lines. Later that evening, after guests had departed and children were asleep, Evelyn and Dash stood in the hallway between bedrooms. Maya in one room, Marlo in the other, both peaceful in sleep. The apartment was still messy from dinner. Dishes done, but evidence of the meal lingered. And it was perfect. You know what I realized today? Evelyn kept her voice low to avoid waking anyone. What's that? I spent 34 years believing I couldn't love because Catherine trained it out of me. But I was wrong. Love was always there. I just needed someone to teach me it was safe to feel it. Dash pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. You taught yourself. I just stuck around while you figured it out. They stood together in the quiet, and Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought them here. The fear, the fighting, the choosing to be brave when every instinct screamed to run. She thought about Catherine slowly changing, about Margaret finding peace after decades of regret, about Marlo and their future child growing up in an environment where emotions were welcomed rather than punished. Some people said ice queens could never change, that people like Evelyn were too damaged to become warm. But standing in this hallway, surrounded by evidence of love, sleeping children, a partner who had never given up, a family built through choice rather than obligation, Evelyn knew they were wrong. Ice did not stay frozen forever. All it needed was warmth. And she had found hers in the last place she expected, with a single dad, his daughter, and the courage to let herself melt completely. The thunderstorm arrived with dramatic timing, as if the universe wanted to test their newly acknowledged feelings. Rain lashed the windows, and thunder cracked loud enough to rattle glass. Marlo appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed elephant, eyes wide with fear. Daddy! But instead of running to Dash, she ran to Evelyn. The choice was instinctive, unconscious, and it caught all of them by surprise. Small arms wrapped around Evelyn's waist, face buried against her stomach. I'm scared. Evelyn froze. Every instinct screamed that she was unqualified for this moment, that she would do or say something wrong, that comforting a frightened child required skills she had never developed. But Marlo was trembling, and thunder crashed again, and there was no time to overthink. Her arms came up slowly, awkwardly, wrapping around the small shoulders. You're safe, sweetie. I've got you. Marlo burrowed closer. Evelyn looked helplessly at Dash, who was watching with an expression that suggested this moment meant something significant. He nodded encouragement, and Evelyn found herself swaying slightly, the way she had seen parents do to soothe crying children. A melody surfaced from memory, something her nanny had sung when Evelyn was very small, before Catherine had decided the woman was too affectionate and dismissed her. The words came back haltingly, French lyrics from a lullaby about the moon and stars and being safe through the night. Evelyn sang quietly, voice rough from disuse but strengthening as the verses continued. Marlo's trembling slowed. The thunder seemed less frightening, with someone holding her, singing to her, making her feel protected. When she finally pulled back to look up at Evelyn, her eyes were wet but no longer terrified. That was pretty. What language was that? French. It's a song someone used to sing to me when I was your age. Will you sing it to my baby brother or sister? The question punched through Evelyn's carefully maintained composure. You want me to? Oh, yeah, it made me feel safe. The baby should feel safe too. Marlo yawned, the storm forgotten, and allowed Dash to carry her back to bed. Evelyn remained on the couch, still feeling the phantom weight of child arms around her waist, still hearing the echo of words she had not realized she remembered. When Dash returned, he sat beside her without speaking for a long moment. You're a natural at this. His voice was quiet, almost awed. I don't think you believe it yet, but you are. I didn't know what I was doing. That's what everyone feels. You think I knew what I was doing when Marlo was born? I was terrified. Still am sometimes, but you do it anyway, and eventually instinct kicks in. He shifted slightly closer. The fact that she came to you instead of me, that's huge. She trusts you completely. I didn't expect it to feel like this. Like what? Evelyn struggled to articulate emotions she barely recognized. Like I matter. Like I'm not replaceable. Like someone needs me for something other than business decisions or money. Understanding flooded Dash's expression. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. The gesture was simple, but the warmth of palm against palm sent electricity up Evelyn's arm. Neither of them moved, both suddenly aware of proximity, impossibility, and a line they had agreed not to cross. You matter, Evelyn. Not because of what you can provide or what you can do, just because you're you. The words undid her. Tears spilled over despite her best effort to control them, and Dash pulled her into a hug that felt nothing like business partnership and everything like human connection. Evelyn let herself be held, let herself cry, let herself experience comfort she had not known she needed. When they pulled apart, faces were too close, breath mingling, something dangerous sparking between them. Dash's hand came up to cup her cheek, and Evelyn leaned into the touch like a plant seeking sunlight. We shouldn't. His words contradicted the way his thumb stroked her cheekbone. Definitely not. Neither of them moved away. The almost kiss hung in the air between them, fraught with everything they had agreed not to let happen. The timer on the oven saved them. Dash had put garlic bread in before the storm, and the beep shattered the moment. They separated quickly, both slightly flushed, neither quite meeting the other's eyes. The rest of the evening was marked by careful distance and overly polite conversation. When Evelyn left, the good night was awkward, both of them acutely aware of what had almost happened. She drove home through streets still wet from rain and tried to convince herself that the wanting she felt was temporary, situational, nothing that would complicate their carefully constructed arrangement. The lying was unconvincing, even to herself. Thank you for joining me on this journey of love, redemption, and the power of chosen family. Evelyn's transformation from Ice Queen to loving mother shows us that it's never too late to change, to heal, and to find the family we truly deserve. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more emotional tales of love conquering all. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which moment made you cry? Which scene made you believe in love again? Remember, sometimes the coldest hearts just need the right warmth to melt completely. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to transform lives.